Hi, I'm going to start a timer, and thank you very much for having me. It's a lovely atmosphere, and it's nice to be back up in Sheffield. I grew up just down the road, and used to volunteer for this festival, and so it's peculiar being back here in this context. I'm not a documentary maker. What I want to do is just show you some of the practices that we enjoy and explore. And hopefully, some of the techniques and work that we've done might be appropriate. It might be eye-opening for you. It might be utterly irrelevant. But I've got a whole bunch of slides that I'll whack through. I was thinking about what connects Marshmallow Laser Feast, which is a ridiculous name, to you lot. I'm curious, firstly, to see who has used virtual reality. A show of hands. Keep your hands up if you make virtual reality. And thanks, that's good to see. And last question before I dive in. Who goes home and the first thing that they do once they've had a cup of tea goes into virtual reality? Right, okay. Just saying. It's early days. I trained in film and television, and it was at a time when the internet was just emerging, and it had a profound effect on me. I got really interested in digital and the creative possibility of what the internet offered up. Ironically, with so many ambitions to tailor work stories for the rectangular screen, in fact, Marshmallow Laser Feast and my whole working career has dabbled in a bit of film, but primarily, we've been catering for the outside of that rectangle in the physical space. And along the way, the birth of the internet and the glimpse at the creative potential is the thing that got me going. It's the thing that changed my interests entirely. And the prospect of non-linear narratives and those snowballing ideas, essentially, are the kind of things that, looking back now and realizing that, geez, it was actually a long time ago, lots of the things that I was excited about creatively then are now actually just about being able to be realized because of things like the infrastructure and broadband and so on, and all kinds of other unexpected things that are emerging. As I mentioned, I grew up down the road in the countryside in Breton at the Sculpture Park. And it was a lovely place to grow up and engage with nature. And weirdly, I was looking at my phone earlier and thinking, you can't really teach and encourage people to engage with the natural world. And in 2007, there were many more people. For the first time, there were more people living in the city as opposed to living in the countryside, rurally. And I think it's a problem. I think the disconnect with nature is a real concern. And lots of the work that I'm going to show you a bit later on will contradict my offering that people should really give a shit about nature. And questions will emerge like, why are they using technology and all that petrol and oil and gas and electricity to realize their ideas when they should be hippies in a yurt making kombucha, or however you pronounce it? But there's something deeply ingrained about my personal connection to the natural world that I think we're trying to tie that into the work that we do. And I think that one of the other things that connects me as a non-documentary maker with documentary makers is that our collective give a shit. And I think that there's no more extraordinary place to engage as a documentary festival to realize, wow, there's a lot of dedicated people here who've made all kinds of extraordinary sacrifices, because generally they give more of a shit than most people. It's fascinating. I've got loads of slides, so I'm going to speed things up. I'll talk about communal experiences as well. I think generally there's kind of individual, especially with virtual reality, lots of it's restricted because we can't engage with, there's a technological limit at the moment. There's examples of communal experiences in things like VR and AR and eventually mixed reality or XR. But along the way, it's a kind of duality anyway. When you go to the cinema, it's a communal experience, but you're taking away an individual experience. And I'll just park that for a bit and come back to it. We did loads of R&D along the way, and it's hugely important for us to make loads of mistakes. And we made colossal mistakes and learn from it, and then build on the back of that. And along the way, we have a tool set that we have developed that we can revisit, and it's this wonderful cyclic and shared shorthand. This is the process that we work with. We're a peculiar entity that grows when certain jobs come in and shrinks back down when we're in pitch mode, I guess. But I can't stress how in our field, we're reaching out and collaborating with experts, with people doing all kinds of extraordinary things like Bath University. It just is part of the creative process and something very exciting for me, which leads to the kind of questions that crop up. And a lot of the time, there was Walter Murch yesterday. It was great seeing Walter Murch. What a fantastic human being, and what a beautiful way to describe stopping something in its tracks. A pebble stopping a train going 150 miles an hour immediately is so expressive. And certain questions in our practice crop up that stop me in my tracks. And the other day, we asked ourselves this: do dolphins dream in sonar? And it's basically confirming that we should be in a yurt. But actually, to get to that question, it's important for us as a creative entity to go like, geez, this is actually, it's more than just a daft question, because we're thinking about multi-sensory experiences. We're thinking about audio-visual, but then if your primary sense is using sonar, like the sperm whale, for example, that kills its prey using sound, and bats, of course, and just different ways to experience and different sensory perspectives is something that's really curious, because it just takes ourselves out of our everyday laborious groundhog routine. And so there was something that was mentioned in the earlier panel. David from the NFB mentioned something that triggered a thought, and it was, when was I genuinely taken out and really shocked and moved, profoundly moved by something? And tragically, when I was walking out of this room, it occurred to me that, yeah, the most recent one, it was a profound feeling. Oh, yeah, I was welling up. It was chuffing Moana at high altitude. Flying in an airplane, I was watching a Disney film, and because of the conditions, I was exhausted and all the rest of it. It's slightly tragic that a Disney film that is using all the magical superpowers of, the huge psychological onslaughts, these things. But I think my point is, and the reason why I'm mentioning it, is that in the age of distraction and the abundance of all this stuff that we've got to enjoy and graze on and deep dive and binge through Netflix, there's various questions that emerge. It's like, are we actually genuinely being moved from day to day? And it's really tough for programmers at documentary festivals. It's really tough for people to compete to create a moving piece of work when there's so much moving stuff out there. And lots of it is to do with the conditions. And again, at high altitude and being squashed in and knackered and with nowhere to go, even though it's a daft scenario, there's various bits of pageantry that go into that moment of an emotional response. And we like that. We like the fact that there's textures and a multi-sensory element to it, and the pageantry and stepping through to an event that moves someone. And we're learning loads, and there's so much more to do. I'll just show you this in the background as we go. It just talks about, this shows you some of the work that we've done. That was a landscape out of a portrait that we made for VR. This was an elaborate show we did with everyone's favourite band, U2. We've done a lot of VR experiences and worked with people like Castrol and BP, and I'm really embarrassed about that. But honestly, this was my favourite project. Multisensory. It was a drone show that we did. It was a ballet for drones. That was for McLaren. This wasn't for a brand. It was a laser forest that we made for Stripe Festival. So it was a robotic sculpture that we did for a brand. And this, again, was more R&D than anything else. It was real-time projection mapping using Unity. And it just exposes the interest in theatrics. We did this ages ago. And I still look back at that really fondly because actually we created a chemical balance within the creative team that just lived and breathed the work, and that's where we try and maintain our activity. Lots of laser beams and things like that. Dance we work with a lot, and we have touring installations too. And if it were up to us, we'd probably be touring installations full time, but we've got to pay the bills. We live in London, and there's certain moral choices, and one of our moral choices is to work commercially as well. Love it or hate it. It's just an image from my private stash. This is... this expresses the two horses that we run. We have a commercial horse and an artistic horse. I'm going to whiz things along here. Immersive 360 experiences. Thanks to the internet. I love the internet. I love the fact that it caught me at a great time. I love the fact that I got swept up in the CD-ROM. It had so much promise in a similar way to what VR and augmented reality has right now. When I was introduced to the CD-ROM, I was actually genuinely excited. All praise to the CD-ROM. How fascinating is it that narcissism can drive so many markets? When they flocked in their droves to the Apple Store to not test the power of the computing, but to take weird, bendy selfies. I love the internet. It's ace. There's so much information there. And in terms of the work that we do, you can find information about 360 cameras. 360 cameras that are going to provide volumetric captures. This is a big problem, and it actually has a lot of impact on documentary makers because things aren't just going to be flat, you're going to be able to walk around. So instead of, in virtual reality, things being stuck to a sphere, they're volumetric, and you can engage with a scene and interact with something here and something there, and you can look under there and look into there. The things like AR that are on the horizon, web VR, robotics, inside-out tracking that Google are pioneering with Project Tango and merging that into the... What's that in the corner that I put in yesterday? Fidget spinner guitar tutorials. I didn't even know the word fidget spinner a week ago. And sure enough, I can now learn how to make an electric guitar fidget spinner performance. Things like the holographic, volumetric material going to effectors and to the greater extent are going to be marketed more heavily in gaming. It's really difficult from a non-gaming perspective to prize people out of the gaming industry. All that talent that just flock to the AAA games who want to make things like Grand Theft Auto or or Zelda or Little Big Planet. It's really difficult because it's so set in terms of virtual reality as well. It's just got a very fixed trajectory. Mixed reality! It's extraordinary how we can giggle at an animated GIF. We're so media savvy, we're so image savvy now and literate that we can... Hats off to Walter Murch for his observations so early on. We can make meaning out of the most peculiar things, and me saying mixed reality at that particular time is affecting our experience of that. God bless the internet. The internet can tell you stuff. What's this? The Caleb Foundation, a fascinating organisation directly intertwined with the DUP. I'd suggest you have a read about these friggin' fascinating characters. It's really tricky growing up and knowing that you give a shit about the environment and realise that the one who really gave a toss, who had the budgets, already nailed it so perfectly. And we use Michael Jackson Earth Song as a check, really, because we respect audiences and you don't have to lay it on so thickly. And lots of the work that we try and do is to dial it back down. And I think that the art of restraint is something that in this world where there's so much possibility, the art of restraint is a really tough task, because especially in a collective creative environment where it's like, we could do this, we could do that, we could have branching narrative. What if the branching narratives were branching 3D spheres and so on? We're at a stage with technical advances. It's a work in progress. There's so many errors, so many problems at the moment, and similar to the way that the early film and all the experiments there, all the tinkering, with regards to virtual reality and that whole interactive digital media. It's so early, and we should savor it. We should laugh and look back nostalgically at how daft everyone looks in VR and how awkward you feel, because I thought the same about iPads when they first came out. I was like, no way am I going to use that daft tablet. It looks like you're on Star Trek. And sure enough, it just worked their way into our lives. There's so many fascinating errors. Like with artificial intelligence and the ways that the internet is beginning to learn and understand us and become aware, self-aware. You know, it's a really curious time, because it's almost as though the whole internet is trying to make sense and understand us. And I see virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality as this, essentially an extension of what was going on with Flash. That's because it's my direct connection to the creative digital media is things like Director and Flash and all those early experiments. And we're in that stage where within Flash, people just really went to town with experiments. You probably remember websites where you'd move the mouse, but the mouse would move the other way, and it's really like digital art. And it's just people working stuff out. And it's a lovely community to be engaging in at the moment, because all the grammar, all the language of that particular medium, and it is a new medium, is still in the kind of work in progress stage. Things like ubiquitous technology are coming into play, the Echo, Siri, all the Siri errors. Everyone who's used Siri has spent more time correcting it and getting frustrated with it, I'm sure, as using it in a slick way. And so this is, what did I do with this? So Siri, hey Siri, tell me about a wall, a Tesla power wall, the Great Green Wall, the fascinating Great Green Wall that's trying to stop the Saharan drift. Walls. Trump's wall. Waltz. And talking about dance and waltzes, we work with dance, and this is an example of early mocap, real-time mocap for performance in a kind of augmented reality setting. We worked with Alexander Whitley, who's a choreographer who's doing a project here tomorrow. This isn't a project, but again, lots of R&D. This is projected onto a gauze, and essentially we track the motion and interpret the motion of a dancer and project it in 3D, what appears to be 3D space. Oh, there's loads to get on with. The multisensory experience of the drone show that we did was accidental. The things that, the human elements were the things that really got us. The drones were quite wobbly. The drones, when they had mirrors on the bottom, and they reflected lights onto the audience. And when you felt the light on your face, it blinded you, left you dazzled for a moment. and was warm. And that, glimpsing that accident, we're like, wow, there's something about that if we'd have simulated it and purposefully designed it to do that, it would have lacked, I think, the fragility and accidental qualities of it. It was a really enjoyable project. And again, working with interactive spatial elements, and this notion of immersive environments, interactive environments, is something that we're very much into. The Laser Forest was a musical interactive environment. It was interesting to observe an individual who entered the space alone had a very serene and peaceful setting, but at other times when it was very busy, it had a very different experiential quality. It could be played like a musical instrument. Our goal for that project was to grow green bamboo with the technology inside, but as most of these projects go, it's limited by the fact that our budgets are restricted. In the Eyes of the Animal is a virtual reality experience that started with a site-specific visit. It's a simple narrative of the journey up the food chain. You start life as a mosquito, then you're eaten by a dragonfly, then a frog, and then an owl. And it's in virtual reality. What's weird about this project is it started out as a virtual reality project, but evolved into a social experience. It was important for us to hide all the technology away. We're conscious of this zeitgeisty element of being too carried away with just the tech. So the idea was that we'd hide all the technology in bushes, have people hike and discover these headsets, sit on a tree stump, smell the forest and feel the forest under their feet, but have nobody greet them and say, smell the forest and feel the wood under your feet. All of this kind of stealth element, this stealth education, was purposefully, we reduced it all back. But we had a really positive response from it. And it's interesting because there was a performative element to it as well, in terms of observing virtual reality use is curious because the users become the performers as well. This was for Abandoned Normal Devices, a fantastic festival up in Manchester. I think they're doing something in Sheffield. But the most satisfying thing was when little old ladies, ramblers, oblivious of the whole project, came out of the bushes and tried it out. And we got a really raw, interesting experience. It was so rewarding. And it's peculiar to integrate the natural world with, so we used moss, bark, and different vegetation on the headsets to inform the user just through touch. And it's fascinating how you can affect people just through the use of different materials. To make the piece, we used a LiDAR scanner, so not a camera. My friend playing the saxophone badly. We used a LiDAR scanner. So to scan an environment, you see LiDAR scanners, architectural surveyors. They plonk a LiDAR next to an area where they're going to build a bridge, and they get a really detailed point cloud. So with that data, we made an interactive experience that eventually worked its way into Ron Arrad's Curtain Call, which essentially is a communal experience so a VR project tailored for the individual worked its way into a collective experience where people could walk around it and inside it, and it now tours. It also went into a full dome. I just had a great conversation about how full dome is a really good outlet for 360 for obvious reasons. And we just developed it for the Gear VR in the Eyes of the Animal. And that was a challenge as well because we didn't have the hike, and we realized that we were faced with a lot of problems because without the experiential element of hiking and putting on a haptic vest that vibrated, that simulated dragonfly wings, we needed to do something else to entertain someone that was just viewing it at home. And so we ended up working with a writer to add poetry to the piece. And again, so you saw a little clip of this earlier. We use different technologies. In terms of volumetric capture, that's a real buzzword at the moment. And in this case, to make a landscape out of a portrait, we used photogrammetry. And you can get exceptionally precise and detailed material. This slide always reminds me to say that if a person is blindfolded and they reach out and they feel marble, then of course your experience is completely, it's directed by the sense through your fingertips. If it was warm and fuzzy, it'd be something else. If it was cold and wet, again. And what I'm trying to do is just expose that in this multisensory setting that we'll be moving into, thinking about this really has an effect and can help enhance your work. We've done hand-drawn VR. I'll skim through this and stop at Arspicarm's buttock gel. It was a satirical music video that questioned what a world would look like if everyone were addicted to virtual reality. Treehugger is a project that we're touring now. It's the journey up a giant sequoia. And again, we've used a mixture of photogrammetry and LiDAR to create a 3D world, essentially, that requires a sculptural element that to help people engage with the work comfortably. It's weird. People, when they have something to hide in, it seemed that they were more comfortable with interacting as opposed to being in virtual reality and being exposed. If they could hold on to something and stick their head inside, in this case, it allowed people to unleash a bit more. And it tours now and is something that we implemented at Tribeca with scent as well. We had a scent track. So this was another challenge, really, for us to develop with a team of experts a scent track. So at different intervals, people would smell musty floor, and then if they stick their head inside, and gauging the different frequencies was just fascinating. And we realized that lots of that had to be quite literal. Oh, crikey, I'm running out of time, so I will kind of skim through. This was we're so excited about the prospects of building on Treehugger. Chameleon is probably the second most documentary. Again, starting with Beryl, we were engaging with her 3D form and realized, you can stick your head inside. So we came up with an idea to take portraits of people. And we worked with the British Council in Mexico to take portraits, and then in a volumetric setting, if you put your head inside that portrait, you'd learn a little bit more about the environment that they're from and a little bit more about them. And it was called Chameleon, and it was presented in a photographic museum. And so, ironically, the only bust, or the only head on the plinth in the gallery was a VR user cricking their head over one of the boxes. But what we did with them was work with Bath University, and we ran all kinds of machine learning to approximate facial expressions. And this really exposes where things are going in terms of artificial intelligence is going to profoundly affect us, definitely, and in positive ways and terrible ways. And in this case, we were able to puppeteer the characters, the portraits, just from a neutral scan, and we'll eventually be able to, eventually be able to generate full images, 3D images from stills, which is quite fascinating. I'll skip this and keep going and mention the wonderful piece. And Alex, who's in here, spoke earlier about Future Aleppo. It was a new project for us to engage in because it was an outside director coming in, and what the production team were able to do in-house is work with Alex to generate a piece that we encourage you to go and see in the Millennium Gallery. And we're really grateful to be bringing that piece to you. And we're especially grateful to have met Alex to really understand that, my God, Alex gives a shit. A passionate project that he's thrown his heart and soul into. And I think he's representative of most of documentary makers. And finally, to mention Sweet Dreams, which is a research project we're doing at the moment, a multi-sensory experience that asks the question, do people taste in their dreams? And if they can we flavour them? And what we're doing is working with scent, and we're working with touch, and we're working with the Fat Duck Experimental Kitchen to realise that research. It's over 18 months, and Bath University are helping us track deformable objects. And so hopefully one day we'll be able to apply that technology in different ways. And maybe the prospect of deformable objects for you lot might, and the tools that we create, might be used in a completely different way. Thank you very much.